let's jump into this thing, man. The Rose Bowl. We'll get into that one first. This was look. Michigan was the 2-point favorite in this one, and lots of people I talked to just could not understand why Michigan was favored in this game. And we saw it. There was a lot of people that said, "Well, I just think the Big Ten's just not that good this year." I don't know about the competition that they've played. They played a weak schedule, and this is true. This is very true. But Alabama tried to tell us who they were several times this year, and it's hard. It's hard to predict against a Nick Saban Crimson Tide team. I mean, they had a huge coaching advantage. They have a coaching advantage and talent advantage in every game they play. So I think it was hard for people to wrap their head around that. But Michigan they had the better playmakers in this game. I mean, that's really what it boiled down to. You had, for Alabama, Jermaine Burton had 4 receptions for 21 yards. For your bell ringer wide receiver, that's not going to work in a game like this. Well, Alabama actually buttered their bread on the ground in this one, and were pretty successful running the football, but they needed that extra element, that playmaking element through the air to be able to move the ball effectively and put points on the board against this really, really, really Michigan defense. What did you think about the game?
Well, it was a great game. I obviously had Alabama winning the game. I had them picked to win just because of the Jimmies and Joes on the field. And also I had concerns about McCarthy's ability to pass the ball more than 20 times in a game because we haven't had to see that. And he was able to do it pretty successfully. I mean, he didn't have a perfect game by any stretch, but he did what he needed to do. Didn't turn the ball over. Thought he did on that first pass that he had, but
Yeah.
and I thought, man, we're in for a routing, in that first play, first pass at least for McCarthy. But he ends up 17 to 27 for 221 yards and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. A fine day, by his standards and by Michigan standards. And look, my concern was pretty valid that Michigan hasn't had to do this. So can they do it? Right. And they proved that they can, that they had a little bit extra in the tank that they had been holding out on, and they had it ready to go when they needed it. And that's exactly what happened. Blake Corum looked great against a tough rushing defense. I thought that he played pretty well, averaged 4.4 yards per carry. That's plenty good in a game like this, right? That's not a great season average, but in a heavyweight matchup like this, that's pretty dang good. You'll take that, and including the game winning catch there at the end. So what a great game! I thought Roman Wilson played really well, especially in that second half. We saw him kind of come to life, and just a pretty complete game for Michigan, given the special teams issues that they had. I thought that they had a really good game. Obviously, the special teams. I mean, I don't know how you give them anything less than a D or anything greater than a D. Kind of score here for the special teams. I thought they were pretty bad. There were 3 punts that they attempted to field within the 10-yard line, or they did field within the 10-yard line, and it just seemed like they just could not figure out the punt return thing, and I don't know what the deal was there. But they were able to kind of persevere that and get through that. Also, the 1 point for the extra point that they botched, and could have ended up costing them the game if Alabama comes out with this thing in overtime. So they definitely had some head scratching moments in special teams, but the defense did a great job and gave the offense an opportunity to win the ball game, and they did just that. On the Alabama side, I thought that Alabama, they had the issues with this in the snapping game, right? And a couple back to back there. They have all year, and it kind of reared its ugly head. They kind of went away from that in the SEC championship game. They also did a better job of protecting Jalen Milroe in that game than they had all year, and they didn't do such a good job of that last night. So we kind of saw the typical Alabama team from or typical in a sense of this season and what we've seen. kind of come back out, and they had been making some progress the past few weeks. Looked great, had obviously their best game against Georgia, and kind of regress back to the mean there a little bit, and who they were in this game, I thought. So given that, I thought it was a pretty average performance by Bama, and they needed to be well above average in this game, and that's kind
Yeah,
of what happened. I thought that Michigan, I think Michigan's a better team, first of all, and
definitely.
really this game could have gotten a little bit more out of hand had they not had the special teams issues. But it was a competitive game, a fun game to watch, and I think the better team won, and I think that's an important takeaway.
Yeah, and like I said, man, I think a lot of people just kind of get blinded by the Bama thing, but I mean, JJ McCarthy played way better than Jalen Milroe.
Hmm.
Like, and not even close. I mean, Milroe 16 of 23, 116 yards, averaged 2.3 yards per pass. I mean, that is horrible. And you're not going to win a playoff game like that. And this Alabama running attack was never good enough to fill that gap. It was going to take a 300-yard rushing day on the ground to fill that gap. And as you said, Michigan tried to hand them the ball several times. A lot of fumbles in this game. The ball ended up on the ground a bunch, but only a couple of them ended up being turnovers. And then the special teams thing was very surprising to me. I thought that was a clear advantage for Michigan in this game. And I was thinking, man, this game's going to be about who makes the mistakes. Well, it wasn't necessarily the case. I think Michigan did a good job covering up their mistakes by playing really, really solid defense in this game. But again, 116 yards through the air is not going to get it against this Michigan team. You're not going to be able to just bludgeon them on the ground. That was never going to happen. Um, where does Alabama go from here? Do you think Milroe is a legitimate, like, top tier SEC quarterback? Do you think that?
I think he could be if he had Georgia's offensive line and protection. I think you'd see a much better version of him.
I think that his passing game, he has all of the ability to be a good top tier passer, but it's not anywhere close to a polished product. And I don't know, man. I'm starting to wonder. I'm really starting to wonder. We know his ability to run is elite, and we understand that. But you can't be a one trick pony. You can't be. He's not really a dual threat quarterback in the sense that
Mhm.
he's really only good at running. He can throw the long ball, and that's helpful sometimes, but his short to intermediate game is kind of a mess. And you're right, the Alabama offensive line. Look, they allowed let's see, 6 sacks in this game on
Mhm.
him, and against Georgia, Georgia sacked him 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
So you you're talking about um, like over 50 sacks given up for the year. That is not what we're accustomed to seeing with an Alabama team, and we're not going to see a successful Alabama team when they're giving up that kind of sacks.
That's right.
I don't think so. Definitely got to go back to the drawing board. I said it all year. I think this was one of the best coaching jobs by Nick Saban in his career
Mhm.
because I think this is one of the worst teams that he's had that he's made a run with. Anyway,
It's
um,
it's funny because, from a recruiting perspective, it's the best team he's ever had, right? As far as like a blue chip ratio, it's the best, most talented team he's ever had. But then when they get on the field, they don't have you can clearly tell they don't have the amount of first round talent that they've had in the past, even though the recruiting rankings would say otherwise.
yeah. Well, and I think a lot of that, Mason, is in part due to the fact that he doesn't have as good of coaches around him as what he's had in the past. And as great as Nick Saban is, he's the greatest of all time. There is zero doubt about that. But his greatest teams, he's had some amazing coaches alongside of him. I mean, Kirby Smart being one of them, won multiple championships with him. Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian. That's what's missing for this Alabama team at this point. There is none of that. And, you know, I didn't even know this, but the offensive coordinator for Washington, I forget his name. It's a Krenikowski or it's a
Mhm.
weird last name or whatever. Um, Nick Saban tried to hire him
Yeah.
last year before he hired Tommy Reese, and he turned him down. He
Yeah.
turned Nick Saban down and said, "I've got a chance to win one here in Washington." And lo and behold, here's Washington going to the national championship. But that kind of just further proves the point that these are not, and we all know that Alabama wanted Jeremy Pruitt at defensive coordinator. But then there was a show cause slapped on him, and it was not going to happen. So they ended up going and getting Kevin Steele. So I think that there needs to be coordinator changes, but I don't know that there was enough. Um, I don't know that there was enough displeasure among Alabama, boosters and things like that to make anything like that happen. Do you think Alabama's going to make changes like that?
I don't think that they will at the coordinator position. My understanding is that they've been plenty happy lately with the coordinator hires and the play calls and things like that. But my concern, kind of going back to what we were talking about, is the development aspect, and that typically comes from the other on field coaches, the position coaches, and if you can find a offensive coordinator like the coordinator at Washington who can do both, call plays and can develop,
Mhm,
then you've really got something. That's how Todd Monken was at Georgia. He was a
mhm,
great developer, not a great recruiter, but he could develop wide receivers and quarterbacks really well. Um, so I think that that's where you kind of have to look at, and you know Nick Saban in Alabama in, I think it was 2018. Before they won their championship in 2018, they kind of went to a model of hiring coaches that can get the job done on the field, right? And play callers more so than developers and recruiters. They said, "Hey, look, we've got the pieces, but we got to go out and win, on the field." And they had a philosophy change from a recruiting philosophy to, "Hey, we've got the talent. Let's go play with what we've got, and get a little bit sharper in that sense." And I don't think that they've ever come off of that. And the recruiting machine is doing what it's supposed to do, but I think that there's a lack of development, and I think that that's probably as easy as we could put it.
yeah. Well, we're going on. It's 2024, and Alabama hasn't won a title since 2020, and a lot of people don't really count that. That there was teams that played 6 games that year, 4 games that year. I mean, it was a great team. Don't get me wrong; it was a great
Yeah,
team and everything. But it's been a while since we've seen this Alabama team win a championship, and there's
yeah.
obviously something missing.
I
And
mean, that team though in 2020, I'll just go ahead and tell you, they would have beat Georgia in 2021. That was a really good team in 2020, and I don't think anybody can take anything away from them. That was a heck of a team. It would have been a good game. I think that's what a lot of people would have wanted to see, but I don't want to take anything away from 2020 Bama. But outside of that, it's been since 2017. Since they've won, and the first time in Nick Saban's career that he's gone 3 seasons without winning a national championship
yeah.
at Alabama.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was an odd year. Definitely a great team, specifically a really good offense. Um, but it's been a while, and I'm starting to wonder. I'm thinking this might be it. It's going to be hard for them to win one next year. I feel like, but we will definitely be keeping our eye on that as the SEC schedule is completely changing, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And Alabama is going to be a big part of some big matchups next year. But Alabama 20, Michigan 27. Michigan holds on in overtime. Congratulations to the Wolverines. That was an outstanding Rose Bowl, probably the second best Rose Bowl that I can think of. Behind Georgia and Oklahoma, which was an absolute thriller back in 2017.